Oh, let's get cracking. We are recording. That's good. So welcome to the Confident Wood Refinishing course. So welcome to the course. This is the first session by way of an introduction session to find our feet, make sure everybody's set up, knows where everything is, can ask me any questions, and I'll get started on my piece. But don't worry if you haven't got yours sorted, because this is really where we start from. So you can ask me questions here. I'll sort of point you out where things to go and find that will help you choose something if you haven't, so you've got time. And looking forward to it. I'm very excited to be getting stuck in and working on pieces together. It's going to be quite an adventure. So I think the first thing to say though is I'm going to be doing a demo each week showing the process I go through. Obviously, you see the furniture I've got might not necessarily be finished each stage between, but I want to sort of take the pressure off you feeling like you've got to keep up and you've got to sort of rush off and do the thing. And then if you don't do the thing, you kind of feel like, I haven't done my homework and I better not go this week. It's not like that at all. This is really relaxed. It's me that's got to keep showing up and showing you the next stage, but you might have 2 days off in 2 weeks' time where you can do several of the stages together. So please don't drop off the sessions feeling guilty or getting behind the stuff. It's fine. I want you to be part of it. You can ask questions, and just be involved and be around the group, even if you feel like you've got to catch up a little bit on the doing bits. But if you can, what I'll do is at the end of each one, I'll sort of say this is what we're doing in this week. So in this session, we're going to be assessing our pieces and then also starting on just dismantling it a bit and a lot, depending on what you've got. Obviously, the pieces all vary, and I'll go on to just looking at cleaning as well. So those are the things you could be doing to your piece if you've got it before the next session, if you want to keep up. So I just got a million notes. So like I said, don't worry about the pace, because you can, like they say about catching up with your box sets, you could do a few stages in once. You could clean and strip in a weekend, for example. So, don't worry at all. So like I said, it's very relaxed. I want you to ask questions as much as you need to. Make use of this time, because other courses are, recorded, and you just have to sort of self-serve and motivate yourself. So this is the time to dig into stuff, ask questions, even if you think they're really daft, because probably not. I don't think there are any really. And you'll probably find there might be somebody else sitting on the same question, thinking, thank God you asked that. And also all the questions that get asked, they generally help everybody learn, all of us. And they might stretch me to go and find something out for us all. And that's part of what's exciting for me about doing this, is pulling all information together, because I love, finding out new things and how things work. And so that's why I'm doing this, really, is to be able to sort of share that information, but it lets me go off and do bits more research and pull stuff together. So it's exciting, and that's part of the adventure we're going to be on, because the thing about doing up furniture is something will happen that perhaps I've not experienced before, or we have to kind of like fact find, or we're detectives about how to solve it. And that's really good experience when we're working together like that, because it could take you a year of doing pieces to get that sort of much exposure to different things that might happen. Some people will have it super straightforward, I'm sure. Pieces will behave themselves, but when you've got these older, more damaged pieces, you have to kind of, it's not really, a straight sort of linear path. You might have to sort of problem solve as you go and make decisions as you go. And mine's definitely one of those, because I'm going to try and do as many of the repairs, but there might be a point where I just think, no, I need to take a different tack. And that's what we'll explore together. So it is very much, let's see how they unfold. And then because I prefer to work this way than being like totally structured, plus I don't know what this is going to present to me, I will go through the demos and then fill in any gaps afterwards through little extra demos, and the resource area will build out with sort of reference materials around that. So if there's anything we sort of need to add in that's sort of not really covered, and also sort of setting stuff out a little bit so that you've got something to refer back to later on, rather than having to listen to the whole thing again. So there are already a few bits there, but I'm going to roll it out as I go. So it's a sort of step-by-step thing. You don't sort of see it all and think, oh my God, or get ahead. And then by me trying to support you with that thing, it might confuse other people. So we'll sort of go through it together. But feel free to ask anything as you go, because that's what I want. Post up for help. And we want to be really open straightforward about the issues that we're having, because that's what we're here to resolve and to experience, and that's how we get more confident with what we're doing, is, taking on those challenges. So don't feel like, God, I've messed it up, I can't talk about it. I constantly do stuff and have to redo it. So it's better, and by doing that I also learn loads more stuff. So it's a completely safe space for everybody to show and be honest and upfront, because that's how we're going to get much more out of it. That's what I think. So just a quick orientation on where stuff is, for anybody who hasn't sort of seen the stuff in the group, maybe it's come on just recently, so welcome if you joined us this week. That there is a course resource area, which I'm kind of referring to as that, so it's separate from the Facebook group, and that's on the website. And it's effectively like a members area that you have to log into, you need an account for. And that's a more structured area where you can see the course will be arranged in modules, and the information will be there. There'll be downloadable, things you can print off to reference, sort of notes around the demos that I'm doing, so you've got something to look back to. So that is there. And then what I'm doing is I'm putting them in the group here. Well, I was, except Facebook wouldn't let me post yesterday's document. So I'll put them in here to highlight them, so you know there's something new has been added. But you know what Facebook groups are like. There'll be just stuff everywhere, comments and posts, and things shift and you just can't keep up with it. So this is for the now and the conversations and the stuff that's happening. But as you go through, you probably will see, obviously the course content's there, but the course members area is the place that you're going to go to when you're looking for stuff and you want to catch up. It'll have all the recordings in order, and it's what you'll go to in the future, because Facebook might pull the plug on the group at some point. This is the nature of the beast. So at least that course area is always going to be there for you, and there will be the ability to sort of add questions in the future, as things come up, because that's your go back to resource for your next projects and what you might experience there. So those are the sort of different areas. Do feel free to if you're not sure about anything, just to ask me to clarify or to explain it in a better way. Absolutely no problem with that at all. So let's just talk about, So the other thing is the timings of the demos. Now, I actually worked out when I ran this session the other day about an hour and a half, which is kind of what I'm putting them in for. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an awareness that sometimes they might run a bit longer, and sometimes I might have to move a little element, because it's a bit sort of how long is a piece of string with some elements of the demos. And also, it's the first time I've done this course, so I'm sort of working out as I go along, and experiencing it with you. So the timings are sort of approximate, but we'll see how we get on. And like I said, the good thing about this is having this group is I can always drop in additional demos. The idea is that this will have one session is the main live demos, and the other session is more of a Q&As where we can replay some of the demos before, but we're going to see how it goes, and what you need basically, and what sort of things are thrown up. So I should also say we've got quite a few professionals with us, which is fantastic, and we've also got beginners. So I'm going to make sure, of course, to go from scratch for everybody who's not sort of experienced doing up furniture before, which is exciting. And then for the professionals, of course, you may have your own methods, you may have your own tools, your favourite sort of processes, and that's absolutely fine. This is what works for me. So, give it a go. And if you sort of think, I prefer doing it this way, that's absolutely fine too. And actually, if you want to share some of those things back with us, that just enriches the experience. And I love, picking up new things and getting, tips about stuff. We're always, I think it's part of the mindset of an upcycler is we're always, like a little borrower, sort of wanting to improve and wanting to make things, better. I suppose that's in a nutshell, isn't it? So feel free to share any sort of thoughts you've got. You might see me doing something and think, why is she doing it like that? Because that's a bit, odd. Well, maybe I haven't thought about doing it a different way, but my ways, they've sort of built over time through trial and error. So they work, but there's more and more to skin a cat. So if you've got your own ways, that's absolutely fine. And similarly with the sort of the choices you make in terms of finishes at the end as well. I'm going to sort of lay it all out for you and give you understanding of it, so that you can make the decisions of what you think's best, rather than just, if you want to follow step by step what I do, great, but you can also have that understanding. And I think that's where the title confident wood refinishing comes from for me. It's not about saying, every project's going to go perfectly and you've got absolutely everything sort of nailed, because the nature of the beast with this old furniture is that it will throw up little scenarios, and it's about knowing that you've got a bunch of techniques, you understand what you're working with, and then you can have the confidence to know you can sort out any issues that arise because you've got that sort of understanding. So it's just sort of equipping you to feel confident that you can handle it. Everything's fixable. So I'll give you a load of techniques with which to do that, but you'll have the sort of ability to not be fazed as much by things that happen. So we're going to start by assessing my piece, and I was going to bring the piece in, however, it didn't fit in the door, so I got stuck and had to go back again. So I've just brought some of the piece with me. So you've got a lower door, an upper door, and I've got a shelf as well. Hopefully you've seen in the group the pieces that I've posted. If you want to post your pieces in there as well so everybody can see, that would be great. And if you're not sure, post some pictures in there as well, and I'm happy to have a look and give you a steer. There is a guide in the course resource area to sort of help you to choose something if you're not sure, and give you a few suggestions of places to look as well. If you've got something in mind and you just want to check it out, that's absolutely fine. So that's there. But what I'd also say is make sure that you get a fairly decent starting photograph before you kick off, because and I need to say this before you start to do something to it, because it's so annoying when you've got partway through a process and you think, oh, I haven't got a before picture. So get a good picture, get, right in front of it, straight on, hopefully sort of as level as you can so it doesn't look wonky. And then you'll have, and make sure there's space on the side as well, because it just sort of makes it a bit easier if you do need to edit the picture later. And then you'll have a nice before and after, so you can do that comparison and that satisfying after when you look back at it. So yes, don't forget that, because it's easily done and it's really annoying when you do. Yes, so there's a choosing guide, and so hopefully, if you haven't, you might find something this weekend or over the next week or so. Things like Facebook Marketplace and even Free Cycle's worth having a look. If you're quick, fastest finger first, and things like eBay, of course. And then if you go onto Google Maps and type in charity furniture shop, you'll find ones in your area, which is places you could just drive around a few on a Saturday afternoon if you wanted to, and they're good places, obviously, because you get double brownie points for that. So I've also put up some information about identifying the kind of wood that your piece is made of, and also whether is it solid wood, is it veneer, and is it laminate, that sort of thing. So those are there for you to have a little look at. But I'm going to go through it sort of regard to my piece, and just give you some sort of insight into that, really. I suppose coming to the trying to work out something solid or veneer, that's something I'm going to go through in a minute. But one of the other things is the laminate aspect, because it can masquerade quite well as wood. So that's just something to, if you're not quite sure if it is, because some of it's quite good these days. They actually put the image of, it's like a photograph. Laminate's like a photograph of wood, but sometimes it's on a base, a surface that has got actual texture, like a wood grain on it. So it can be quite confusing. So in that guide, there's a little set of tests you can go through, kind of like deduce whether it's actually wood hiding under there, or if it is the dreaded plastic and it's pretending to be wood. Because obviously we can't refinish laminate as wood on this course. That's going to be the one thing. But whether it's solid or veneer doesn't matter. The reason we want to find out is really for how we proceed. Now, for something like mine, it's quite obvious because I've got some great big bits missing, so that really helps me. And also the era. This sort of era is quite commonly veneer. It's very, very solid. It's just very solidly a different wood inside, which is what a lot of you will find with your pieces. It's not like it's made of something lower quality inside, although some are. This is actually solid wood inside, but it's just not as It's not as, dramatic as the one that's on the outside. Um, so I guess that's probably one of the things that kind of gives it away most of all, though, when you're looking at a piece, whether it is veneer or not, and whether it's solid. And a lot of pieces that appear solid can be veneer. And I still smirk a bit about, is it Oak Furniture Land that it's called? Which they no veneer in here, knock, knock, knock. And, their furniture turns out to be veneer, because, I know people who've refinished it for people and been shocked when the sander's gone through it. And that's one of the reasons we need to establish what we've got, because then we can just be a bit more careful about how we go about it, especially if you're using things like electric sanders. So that's why we're going to sort of have a look at it. In terms of wood type, if you're doing it for yourself at home, it's not necessary to know, but if you're interested in doing up the furniture and it's maybe been in the family for a while, you might be interested to know. And I find it fascinating. When you're selling furniture, it's probably something you do want to put in the description and you want to build your knowledge about. So, don't worry if you can't sort of get a grasp on it. Just post a picture and we'll help, because it's something you get more of an eye for. There's hundreds of types of wood and I wouldn't know every single one at a glance. And in the guides as well, they use one little picture, and wood varies a lot. So it can be, a bit tricky. And sometimes just doing a Google search on what you think it is and looking at all the varieties of that wood can help you nail it down. So, but they tend to, and I think most of us are going to find they fall into sort of broadly similar kinds of wood. So we'll have things like walnut, which is what mine is. We'll have oak, some rosewood. It's a bit rarer. Of the sort of older style of furniture, then into the sort of mid-century. I haven't seen any mid-century pieces coming up on the course yet. Maybe somebody's got one to post up. Having said that, this is mid-century, so I'm kind of tricking myself up a bit. This is mid-century, but it's sort of masquerading as an older style furniture. It's sort of got that Art Deco look about it. But as we'll see, it is actually a later piece. It's probably late 50s, which is your mid-century. But your typical mid-century furniture is things like teak, isn't it? And golden oak, and you might even get some elm, which is much lighter because that's the style. And then I guess other things like maple and yew, and mahogany. Mahogany, of course, big sort of stag popularity, but mahogany going right back through, because as we'll see, there's mahogany on both of these pieces. Reproduction one here, I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe the 90s, maybe the 80s. I'm not sure, but you can tell sometimes by the fittings that they're a bit more robust and a bit more modern looking, and they're not as sort of fine as the older stuff. And then, as I said, this is late 60s. So yeah, have a little look. It's quite fun. You can go down a rabbit hole of that kind of thing. And then the other aspect of it is, with it being things like veneers, is having a look at some of the patterns on it. And this is worth having a look at probably when you come to identify what your wood is, because it can give you a deceptive view of what the pattern is, because what they're doing with veneer, which is a very, very thin layer of wood, it can be like 0.8 of a millimetre thick in some instances, laid over the top of the wood, meaning that exotic woods and expensive woods could be used much more, so they could make more furniture, which is getting into the early mass production era. But what you end up doing is you get some amazing repetitions of the same bit of the wood grain. So it can be, both of these could be cut from the same piece of wood and then mirrored out. But to take it further, this is mirrored out even more. Let's see if I can just get you a close-up. Let's do this. Right. Colour on the camera, isn't that funny? Let's mute myself, because otherwise you'll have two of me. Which way around am I? There we go. Can you see that pattern that is repeated here and here? There's actually a line here where the veneer is flipped, and they call it book match. So think of it as like 2 pages of the book open. So you've got a reflection of the pattern. So actually, the pattern isn't doing these shapes. It's mirroring itself. So it makes amazing pattern look even more amazing. And so you've got it also here down the middle of these drawers, I think. I'm getting the right light, but it's been matched so subtly. I don't know if you're going to see in this light, but there's a very fine line down there And so you can see the pattern doing both. It's a bit easy to see on this one actually. You see there? So look for this on your piece. I've done patterns in the past where I've kind of used that sort of movement and sort of worked with it with my designs. So when you're looking at the patternation of this, it's actually just those lines there. You're not looking for this in the ID guide. So if you can see what I mean. But, you know, by doing that, you can add a lot more drama to a piece. And then if we just have a look at my other piece around here, try not to, can we get that in? So this is, I think this is flame mahogany or something like that. And then around the edges, we've got, this is a different wood, this is called sapele, I think. And it's obviously coming in a different direction. So they've put this beading on just to disguise where the two sections of wood are. Sometimes you get like an inlay, like a golden coloured inlay in there. So you can see that's obviously veneer. Another tip to look for, if you're not really sure, because they might have used one big flat piece of wood and they haven't done this quarter matching or book matching or anything, or even there's one called slip, which is kind of like almost like tiling the same repetition of the same piece. If you can't see anything obvious like that, have a look at something like this. Sorry, dog. So on this side, I've got my flame mahogany and this more sort of silver, slivery sort of stripy wood here. And then the other side, it's totally different. So this is a bit like the wood that's on the outside, really. Just checking you can see that, okay. So you can see the grain is going like this. You see that? So basically the grain is like the fibres of the wood. They're all in sort of straight lines here. But what we've got on the top here is, let's just make sure I'm getting that in the light. Stand it on my knee. Is that the fibres of the wood are going this way across the end, which means that what that's doing is hiding that there's two layers, a layer here and a layer here, and then there's a solid core interior of something else. Because think of it like, the way I like to think of it, which helps me see it, is those lines there, think of it like a box of straws. What you'd see at the top would be the ends of the straws. You wouldn't see the lines going that way. So that's another piece of wood like that that's been laid across the top to disguise it, which we will actually be looking at how you can replace this, because sometimes it gets a bit cracked. And I think if I just turn this round, you will see what I mean at the bottom. You can see different sections of wood here. So that's another bit of a giveaway. But the fact that different woods front and back, this one's got similar wood front and back, whereas another one here is, can I see that on camera? Obviously, it's actually, funnily enough, it's the same wood as this piece here, even though there's probably 30 years between them. And it's an African mahogany, essentially. So I assume it must be grown in copious quantities because it's in a lot of this kind of furniture on the inside. So the inside's all solid wood, which is amazing, but it's just not walnut. So what we'll do is I'll just go through and assess some of the damage. Now that I've had to sort of think about what it is, walnut's great. I know that I want to bring out the glory of the grain in this, so I'm going to make sure it pops. Just turn that off. I don't think I need it for a second. Let's remove that for a sec. So that's good. And I've got sapele on the inside, so nice, which is in pretty good condition. So in this instance, I probably won't be stripping this. I will be stripping this. So these are the sort of things just to go through and to note. You don't need to worry about how you're going to strip it. You don't need to worry about how you're going to fix it. We'll do that. It's just really assessing it and being aware of what you've got on your piece. Anything that's broken and damaged as well. Anything that's warped, anything that's missing, all those sort of things. So I've got wood I'm going to strip. Probably I will show you in the week before finishes how to refresh the interior without having to strip it, so that you just get that wood just to look its best, basically. So that's another thing we'll do when we come to it. And then I'm just going to go over my piece so that I know what might need fixing, what I might need to be aware of when it comes to stripping, to be careful of it, so that I can, not go at it too sort of aggressively and maybe take more off, because obviously I've got some veneer damage here. You might find yours is your whole finish is quite sound, and so you can just sort of think, oh, I'll just wait and see what the next stage is. I'm going to have to go through quite a lot of work with this. So I have got on mine, let's put that on. Just give you a bit of an insight into them. Oh, that's a good view. My glass of water, my tissues. Right, there we go. So I have got, as you can see, the substrate here is actually almost like a ply. So in some instances it's MDF. In these pieces it might actually be solid wood, but it's something that I need to disguise somehow. You can see I've already had a go with a bit of filler on a previous demo. This is all going to need probably a bit of both, gluing and filling. So we'll be coming on to that, of course. But you'll want to go over your piece if you have obvious damage, and I suggest having some damage isn't a bad thing for this one. I'm just going to grab a tool, because you're going to need to know what is sound and what. It's almost like you need to make it worse before you can make it better, because there's no point just filling those gaps and then finding that what's next to it is loose. So I almost need to see, I'm just going to lift it here. Yeah, I'm going to have to glue that. So you kind of need to go around your piece. You don't necessarily have to use a blade, but it does help to use something thin, because it's brittle and it might just go pink and just sort of plink off. And you might actually want to, if you've got a piece that's missing, just glue that piece back in place rather than having to put filler in. Obviously I've got quite a lot of filler that's not really sorted out, but which we're obviously going to come on to. But if you're going to repair it as wood, having the bit of wood is generally easier, which I'm slightly regretting, because I was showing somebody this other day and I twanged a piece of that off, which could have just stuck back down. So I've got quite a lot of damage up here. Similarly, so I'll have to glue and fill, and then I'll look at disguising it. Those are on the big side for disguising and blending in. And it's, especially when you've got wood that's very plain like this, it can be a little bit more difficult. So I'm just going to go through the process with you and see how well I do. And if not, then I'll look at what I do here and whether I use some metallic paint to, cover it. So we're just going to go step by step through it and see what I'm able to achieve. You could re-veneer, and I will be showing re-veneering, but with it being a curve, I think that could be quite difficult. It curves to a sort of mitre in the corner there, so that could be really, really tricky for me. And this is a curve as well. So, but you'll see what I figure out and what I decide to do, because I've not actually had to do re-veneering on a curve. And some of these bits that are cracked here, so they may need to be sort of picked at a little bit when I come to fix them, but it's just an awareness. On the top here I've got water damage. So this is started to sort of eat through the finish. But it's worth saying that some of these surface scratches and some of these areas are literally in the finish. So your piece might look quite battered like this, but as soon as this comes off, your wood sand and leaf, we can start all over. So you might be surprised by how little is there. I've got this here which looks like something's melted to the finish. So that's probably an alcohol or something. But you can see the wood looks fine. So even deep scratches can disappear. You can see how thick my finish actually is. This, on the other hand, is dark and it's black and it looks like it's probably in the wood. But wood can be so resilient, so we'll just strip it and we'll just figure that one out as we get to it. Anything else? I have, I don't know, I've got any missing bits. That's what you're going to sort of work out. You've got any bits of beading or moulding or whatever missing. I've got down here some nibbled bits in the door which actually would need filling because it's gone into the profile of the edge of the door. Excuse me, and I think that's it in terms of damage. It's enough. And then I'm also going to assess my hardware. So this probably won't clean up, but it doesn't matter whether you know or not whether it would. It's really deciding whether you want to keep it, and then you can clean it and see what you get, and then if not, you can spray it. We'll be looking at that on the finishing touches part. But if looks-wise, I don't want to keep them. A couple of them are bent. I've taken this one off already and it's a bit bent, so we'll have a look at those as we go through. Also, have you got any missing catches? Have you got any, bent catches and fittings, that sort of thing? Because we'll be looking at those as well. I also have some structural damage, so have a look at that. I'll just go back to the camera because I'm not sure whether it's actually adding much at this point. I have got some structural damage with my drawers, so these have actually come apart totally. So I will be looking at that. There's a corner there actually. I presume that's at some point somebody's dropped that in its corner, so those can be built out. I've also got, which you might find you've got, which is quite a lot of staining inside here. So that's something we'll also come on to. Some things can be sanded out. Some things could be, obviously you could put a liner in, or you could go, if it started to come apart, you could actually you can take the bases out. So we'll look at that when we get to repair week. And if you've got other scenarios of things that you need to address that aren't sort of obviously here, we'll look at those together and go through them. So you just let me know as and when, and that's why the sort of Q&A follow-up session is quite handy, because you've got time to kind of come and bring them back after the session. Let's see, just got a question in. So that's a great question, Shona. Thank you. If your finish is sound, let's add it in. There we go. If your finish is sound on some large areas, would you always strip the finish? I know you said you wouldn't mask on top of an old finish, but what if it's a large area like a wardrobe door, which is in good nick? It's a really good question. And I think it's sort of in this scenario, we're going to be going through the process of giving you the options of how to strip. What you're looking at in a lot of circumstances, something of this age, is that the varnish itself is quite old now, so it's disguising a lot of the wood. So Shon's referring to about putting tape designs on top of finishes, which I've said in the past, because I did do it for somebody once and it crumbled under my knife, and I thought, why have I said I'll do this? And so it's obviously a much better thing to put new finishes on a fresh surface. So I can totally understand it. I can totally understand keeping it. In this instance, that's going to look amazing when that comes off, because the brown of the varnish has disguised the grain. Now, I'm not 100% sure, because I wasn't alive when this was brand new, but I think there's a combination of old varnishes disguising lovely wood and also fashion. To some extent, I don't know how bright it would have been. It's like thinking about what colour things, buildings would have been originally before the suit. But I think the fashion was to sort of homogenise a bit with a darker varnish. So that's one of the reasons for wanting to strip it back. If it is sound, but perhaps it could look better. If it is sound, I suppose the only thing about refinishing parts of it is trying to make them look the same. That's another issue. But it might be that the piece that you're talking about has specific sections, so you could get away with it by doing some of the enhancement techniques later on, which is to add a little bit of colour into a finish so that you could try and get them similar, or a bit of staining or whatever, to try and but the quality of the way it catches the light might never be the same. That might be a thing. But perhaps when we go through the stripping process, it might not seem so daunting. It might, because I understand it, obviously wardrobe is a big thing. But possibly you might look at it and think, oh, actually, that's not as difficult. So it's about weighing it up, really. If it looks good and it's sound and what you're going to refinish is quite separate from it. I don't know if I probably need to see something, an example. You said we've got wardrobe doors. What bit do you actually want to refinish? Because there's ways and means, isn't there? I think it's probably just the quality of the finish, and you'd get more out of the wood if you redid it, so then maybe they wouldn't blend so well. That's talking hypothetically until I see. That's a really good thing to share as well, though. Might be scared of trashing the so-called patina. Yeah, well, I suppose in terms of furniture with patina, a patina would be aged, and a patina, I suppose, would be aged finish, in a finish maybe that's got a little bit sort of desiccated and started to crumble, and like a more rustic paint effect would. It looks aged, it looks weathered. So In terms of patina, I don't know that a sound finish has a patina particularly, but I could be wrong. So I'd love to see if there's a specific thing you're thinking of. Let's have a little look at it and sort of suss it out, because it might be a look at it and think, oh yeah, that's lovely like that. Furniture is a bit like people. They are complex and loads of different sort of shapes and sizes and varieties. So yeah, it'd be good to have a look. I would say possibly just not seeing the glory in the wood, and I can understand that sort of fear of, "Ooh, I'm going to ruin it." But this is probably what a lot of us are enjoying about doing this furniture, is being able to bring out the wood in a way that that wasn't before. So let's see, have a little look and see. So dismantling, let's get on to dismantling. Let me just check for other things you might want to note down. Oh yes, so I was saying about going around the edge with your, just to check if your veneer's lifted in any places, so that you can note down, you might want to note it down, or you might just get a bit of tape so that you can just indicate it. I'm not that methodical about these things, but when I come to actually strip it, I'll look at it first before I start doing anything too aggressive to it with a scraper or a scraper, I suppose, depends what I'm scraping. And then you might also just want to observe if there's any bubbling, if there's any splitting, if there's any sort of, you can just tell it's sort of lifted and it's a bit sort of loose, that sort of thing. So that's something I want to think about. Yeah, I think that's it. Warping is another thing. Are there any smells? Which is again something we can have a little look at, ways to solve. And I think it's just things like chips, dents, things missing. Yeah, so get that noted down as well, so that you know where you're at. And then we're going to talk about dismantling it, basically, because in order to in order to get the best finish, it's the same when we're painting. We need to get as much of the piece dismantled as possible, so that when we're working with getting the finish off, we can get into all the areas. And then we're putting finishes on. They go on as effectively as possible. So obviously there's going to be times where things you just can't get them apart, and some things that are like some of those automatic sort of drinks cabinets, some of them don't come apart completely. Some of the handles on mid-century furniture are the sort of ergonomic ones. Unless you snap them off, then you might have to go around them. So we'll do what we can to get as much of it as we can off, and where we can. When we're stripping, we want to be working and doing finishes. We want to be working on things flat as much as possible. Some of it, obviously, like the sides, etc., might not. But I'll always take the drawers off, have the drawers out, all that sort of thing, to work on. Whether we're doing, a liquid stripper, or whether we're going to do a more manual one, it's much better to work that way. So we want to get all the handles off, and what I'm going to just do a quick demo of that. Making sure I'm not missing anything. Bear with me. I'll catch up with myself. Oh. I've lost myself. I think I've labelled 2 pages with number 5 on, which is really helpful. I think it was just going to just double check in terms of damage. Hinges, hardware. Oh yes, the other one that I didn't mention was glass. Yeah. So I do actually have a glass door here, and I know there's somebody got a display cabinet. Just having a look at that and how intact it is and what's wrong with it. And also, when you're starting to work this very beginning stage, I would suggest using the low tap masking tape. I don't know if I've put that up in the supply guide yet, but it's the frog tape, delicate surfaces I would use, because it's not too sticky as well. You don't want something you're going to have to sort of chisel off afterwards. And literally use newspaper or printer paper to sort of cut to size and get that all masked off to start with on both sides, because vintage glass I find is a little bit softer, and you could scratch it so easily. So just get it masked off, so that when we're doing any of the sanding or stripping stuff, you're not worrying about it. So I do that at this stage now. But if there's any other things about glass in particular that your piece throws up, let's have a look at that together. And then the other thing is backs of furniture. If your back looks like it will come off and it's got screws, or it looks pretty robust and it's got fairly accessible staples that you could lift, it's worth taking it off, because it's much easier to get in and do the things you need to do and get a nice finish on it, because you can, sort of get into corners. You've probably experienced that yourself in the corners of rooms, but it's much easier. Now for mine, I actually have a little bit hybrid piece going on here. I won't be taking the back off at the bottom because it is stapled, it's in good condition, and I'm just going to refinish that as wood inside. So, it's not going to be painted, so it's fine. My top section, if I'm keeping it, I may take the back off, because I've got glass shelves, which are accessible by the back only. And trying to work around those could be a bit of a nightmare. So the back of this is actually screwed. So if you've got screws, definitely get in there and get that back off. If it's very, I keep doing that. So this was actually attached by 2 bolts underneath here. So if you've got one of these big pieces, you might want to have a little look and see if you can get in, pull the piece apart to some extent. This actually lifts off. So I can actually take the back off and get in. So I've got, you see, it's quite nicely finished at the back, so I can get that off, get the shelves out, and that'll make it a lot easier to get into here with stripping. So whether I keep it on, I don't know. Whether it's a better piece of furniture without it, we'll see. But so the top bit will come off, the bottom bit won't. And then we need to get all of the doors off, all the hinges off, all the catches off. And for that, I'm going to use, most of your furniture is probably going to have a, just check up to speed, is going to have flathead screws. So this kind of screw, rather than a Phillips type screw. If it's got Phillips, it's probably a little bit more modern, which is absolutely fine. And Phillips screws are a lot easier to work with. And getting the screws off is sometimes a bit of a challenge. So I can give you some recommendations if you do find you've got some that you can't get off. Just get rid of that. So I'm getting myself lost now. But the essential thing is, no matter whether you've got old-fashioned screwdrivers or electric screwdrivers, is to push quite hard and to do quite slowly, because they actually, see, you can spin out here, you can grind through the head, and then you get stuck. Now, actually, I was taking this one the other day, and one of them has refused to come out. But I think by finding a slightly better screwdriver and putting a lot of pressure into it, I think I'll be able to sort it. But there's a few little devices you can use, but sometimes you just don't have to drill them out. So let's hope that you don't have that. Let's try and get them off first, and we'll tackle that. I'm just going to do a little close-up of that, so that you can see what I mean, because some people won't have stripped down furniture before. So I just want to see if I can put it up here. Is that the right way around? No. Just get that the right way around. Okay, let's put it up here. It's like being a film director, trying to figure out how. There we go. Put that in there. So there's a tool guide as well in this supply guide. There's recommendations of these tools, and actually most of the tools I'm using are from when I first started. This is a particularly useful one. You've got staples, you've got screws, and this is just a little screw puller from Wilko. It's got a little foot. Let's go this way because it's darker. There we go. Really, really handy. Little tiny bradawl, but it's almost like a tiny screwdriver as well, so that's very handy for little tiny screws. And then things like pliers. I've got regular pliers, but also these little tiny jewellery pliers, which are from doing jewellery, but actually very useful for some of the more fiddly stuff. And I do have an electric screwdriver. It's not always the most useful thing for getting off these screws at this stage. It's more useful for when you're moving doors on and off through your process with Phillips, because it can go a little bit too fast. So that's why manual screwdrivers are good at this point. But if you are looking to buy one, I would suggest getting one with the interchangeable bits in it, so you get all the little interchangeable ends, so that you've got more variety. And you can get that with normal handles or electric. You don't have to spend a lot on them, but it just means you've always got the right size screwdriver on hand. So I'll try it with this first. Let's just get this in. I don't actually know what that's looking at. I'm trying to do this door because I've done the other one, so is it going to let me do it? Sort of. Can we get in there? Yeah, that'll do. So I would do this bit first. Can you see? You can probably see my hand. Get these things out, you know, as you go on. So I tend to push against, and this is on wheels as well, which isn't great. But push against it so that it stays in the slot. With some of them you will find have probably got a little bit of battering. These, I don't think these have ever been off, and these are a bit sturdy because it's a bit of a later piece. But older pieces will have smaller screws, and to me, I just don't put them back on. That's it. They're done after that, unless they are in quite good shape, because the metal's softer and they can just not be any good once they come back out again. So I'll show you those at the end, the sort of screws that I use. If you need to replace them, it's just going round there, wasn't it? And this is where the screw pull is quite handy. So you can just get in there and literally pull out the screw. It's a bit like the end of a hammer, but it's just a bit more smaller. A bit smaller. So you may have to fight a little bit with the old screws, but bearing in mind, nobody thought that 20 years later somebody was going to try and take it apart and do it up, did they? So that's sort of behaving. So see, that's a bit fast. If you've got a drill at home, you can also get an adapter that takes these bits, and you might find that's better because you've got different speeds on your drill. Whereas this has got only one speed and it's fast. So I find if you push in, I'm going to have to take this off now, probably, because it might sort of fall off. And then you will take them off the door as well. You need to do that. Yeah. There we go. If you're not looking at what I'm doing. I'll just get that last one off and then I will move the camera. So this is where a normal screwdriver probably would be better. Come on. There we go. And they're all quite rusty as well, so straighten the bin. So you can keep all your hardware and all your screws and etc. if they're usable, but I want to keep them. So I usually just get a little container and put them all in, and then same with the hinges. The hinges look pretty tired. You can probably see there they look quite tired, but I will try cleaning them up and see how I get on at the end. So chuck them all in a box, save them. Then I also want to get rid of things like these catches. They've also got to be unscrewed. That's where my little screwdriver is quite handy. It's gone. These all need to come off, so that you can get your sander or your scraper in there. And then things like this, which have a little nail, you might want to use a flat edge. I won't do that because that's probably going to need me to put it flat on a surface and put my elbow behind it because it's just getting stuck. But you can see what I mean. They can be a bit challenging. Where's it gone? I think I've had it out since the last. I don't know where it's gone. No, I don't know where it is actually. Just bear with me, because it is a very useful tool, but it seems to have done a wonder. Oh, there it is. I have literally had this since I started out, and it actually looks a bit manky because I've used it for stripping as well. It's the 5-in-1 tool that's in the guide, I could probably treat myself to a new one. But it's a very good all-purpose tool because it's got a very sort of flat, thin edge, sort of it tapers down at the edge there, whereas some of them are very, very square. It means you can get it underneath things for prizing. And it's really good for also, as you can see by the end of it, putting it into something and hitting a hammer to push things off as well. So it's a useful tool, just in general. And so, what was I going to do? I'm just going to, so things like this, when you've got a little nail, you're going to need to get something in flat and try not to bend the actual item. This is just a label, obviously. Again, I'm going to have to be quite careful with this. I just want to try and ease it. This might not be one to do live, but you see it's sort of slightly lifting up a bit. And then I might have to get my screw puller in underneath. You might see little, they're quite tough actually. Sometimes they just come up. You might see these little tiny hidden nails in your handles. I'll just show you a handle in a minute, just to give you an idea. Oh, well, that's actually come off the thing, so, okay. I won't worry about that. I mean, you get the theory, it's just a thin flat blade will help you ease off certain things. This style here, where you've got two parts, so you've got a back plate, and often, you think, I can't get this thing off. Well, obviously, mine's loose. You might find there's little hidden nails in there, which again is just a case of getting a thin blade over it and just levering it up and going around it gently and prising it up. And often they pop off, not unlike that one, they do just pop off. And so this will, now the difference, I just want to show you, because my handles here are actually, because of, I think probably because it's not quite as old as some pieces, my piece has just got screws. So it's very simple. I just put my screwdriver in there and hold the handle and undo it, and then I'll get that off. This kind here, and it's got these, and find them a bit baffling. These covers, apparently called domes of silence, but I think those are the ones that are on you often see them on the feet of furniture as well, but they're used just to cover the nut that's covering the bolt. And sometimes they can be so deeply embedded you don't know what they are, but actually if you look around it enough you'll find a little gap. It's got little teeth, and you just want, this is why this is perfect for this sort of thing, because it doesn't bend, and you just want to ease it and find the gaps and ease it up. If you have to use something like a screw puller to lever it, but generally that's enough, and that will lift it off. This one's not as deeply in as some are, and you'll find you've got like a little book. And then you just need a pair of pliers to get your pieces out. This one's actually loose because obviously it's not a real door, and I might not be able to get it off because I just, let's just see. So I just use a very stiff pair of pliers there. Hold the handle similarly to the screw. I'm just going to go around. There you go, that's working. This is why I like the jewellery ones, they're a little bit easier to twist. There we go. And then all of that into your container, and then we'll come back and assess those later on, but just be aware of anything you might need to replace. I can't get that off, but we'll be able to. Actually, if you can't get stuff like that off, you should just say a little tap with a hammer. Usually should release it. Like so. So there's your two pieces for that one. So that one would actually look pretty nice cleaned up, I think. Some things you can just tell they're corroded, and other things you think, I'll have to wait and see till I clean it. So get everything stripped off as much as you can. I think something else in terms of stripping back, ready to go. Let me just see. Any questions? Anybody got anything on their piece that might be a little bit different in terms of taking it apart? I think you'll have to take that off. Obviously, I'm not going to be taking things like legs off. Shelves, you might want to take the shelves out. Now, my piece has, just put that there. This piece over here, see if there's anything different. Oh yes, there is something different on here actually. I've got what's called an escutcheon. Actually, down there. So that's this thing here, the keyhole. So that will probably be, this isn't the best position to be doing anything. Fortunately for me, I'm not keeping the glass. I'm quite pleased about, because, you know, I'm always worried about breaking glass, because I'm a little bit clumsy. But this is actually going to get boarded up and become a solid door, like the bottom of the cabinet. So again, let's see if this plays ball with me. Shouldn't really do these things for the first time, should you, when you're looking? Yes, that one's decided to come off a little bit better. There you go. So you just got some little pins there. So save those for sure, because they work perfectly, and then we can also make that look nice if we want to. Pop them in the box, wherever it's got a different box. There we go. So that's that on that side. Yes, you might want to take the lock off as well, because obviously you're going to be refinishing this side, so just unscrew that, pop that in a box. And what else? I think that's it. The shelves off my other piece just sat on little brass support, so I just popped them in a box as well. The interior of the other piece is very similar to this one. Some sort of distressing on some of the shelves, perhaps from what's been put in there, so I'll probably sand those back, but they won't be fully stripped as well. So I'll show you how. So obviously if we had to strip it all inside and out, we'd here all year, wouldn't we? Let me know if there's anything else you want to know about the dismantling aspect, in terms of your specific piece. And I'm going to move on to looking at giving you some tips about cleaning, because that's the next stage. And I suggest everybody needs to clean their pieces before we move on to the stripping stage. It's a question I've been asked before. It's like, why do I need to clean it if I'm going to strip the finish off anyway? It's all going to come off, isn't it? You know, whatever's on the surface. You know, because obviously this is it's got dirt on it. It's got, you know, just grime. It'll have the sort of oils from people's hands where they've been touching it over the years around the handles and across the tops here. Furniture waxes and polishes will have built up on it, so there'll be all sorts, really. And so, yeah, fair enough. I'm going to strip it all off. What's the issue? And as usual, I found out the hard way when I used stripper, thinking, well, it's going to take it all off. It's not a problem. And it was a pale coloured wood, and the grub off the surface actually discoloured the pale wood. Certainly with some of the more sort of friction style stripping methods that we'll be doing, or I'll be showing you. You don't have to necessarily do all of them. You can choose, and we can sort of have a look at which one might be best for your furniture. Like the scraping, the cabinet scraper, sanding, again, there's a lot of sort of friction there. That can obviously sort of push whatever's on the surface deeper into the wood. So once it starts to cut through that finish, if there's any sort of oils or waxes or just general dirt, that can go into the wood. It's sort of heated up by the friction of the process, and be pushed into the wood. And we might not know about it till we put our finish on and we find we've got an issue later on. So I strongly suggest we get all that muck off. It's the same as when we're painting. We want to get that off first before we start, and then got a nice fresh surface to clear off. So it's not rocket science. I know everybody knows to a certain extent how to clean, but there's just a couple of things that can make it a bit more effective and a bit easier. Just make sure that I don't break that into the glass. So normally, I'm not going to do it on this session, but normally what I would do is I would have my piece upside down and I would start with a vacuum cleaner. So I would, if you've got a vacuum cleaner with a brush, attachment, for example, and get in there, because I know there's cobwebs under there. But obviously for this session, I can't start turning it upside down to get in there. But that's what I would normally do. I'd start there, and then I'd get my, you can use a dustpan and brush as well, but get in all of these areas. And you also want to get in, not just the drawers, but you want to get in all under here, inside the cabinet. So you want to get into all of this. and get all this dust off and get up inside. So when it's upside down, you'll be able to see much more inside of your furniture to get the dust out. And then when it's the right way up, you do the same job, but obviously be able to see the other perspective. So you want to get rid of all of that. And obviously if you're selling, you definitely do. Nobody wants to be getting a nice newly upcycled piece of furniture and finding dirty rails or cobwebs in the back of it. So we go all over it, and that's actually such a piece that I need. And then we'll do the same with the cleaning. We'll give everything at least a wipe down. Sometimes the bits of sort of scrubbing, the hardest bits are going to be scrubbing, and the bits we're going to be refinishing. So the base underneath might just get a wipe over. You're going to just sort of scrub it to death. But we'll sort of have a little look at how to sort of refinish. In the finishing touches, we'll look at whether we refinish our backs, how we tidy up those extra bits that outside of the good wood, so to speak. So I would be down there sort of cleaning the legs and everything normally first, which I'm not going to in this instance. And then I'll just show it to you on the actual the wood itself in this instance. Whoops. What I didn't also show you before, which might condition, is the condition of my drawer. So this is going to be interesting. I'll probably cover this next week when we come to stripping, because it's stripping of a sort, and this is something it's good to know. There's sometimes it will just pull out, but sometimes it won't. No, and I think I'll show you the method I use, which you can see under there. It'll probably be the nicest drawer of them all when that's actually, but how to get that out easily and effectively. We'll do that next week because it's disgusting. So of course that will be all vacked out before I started doing that. So have a little look in the supply list for what I'm recommending for cleaning products. If you already do furniture and you've got your own preferred product, that's absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. The only thing I would say is just make sure that you're rinsing well enough afterwards. If you're using something that's not sort of natural, biodegradable, kind of non-toxic-y kind of product. Technical explanation. Because what we don't want is any residue on the surface. So with that in mind, I tend to use Fusion Mineral Paints TSP. Let me get that in there. We've got quite a lot of light in here. Let's do it this one, which is that one. Because it's biodegradable and it's, I still don't think you can see it. I like to put a lot of lighting on to balance out the ceiling lights. There you go. So it's biodegradable and organic, and so you don't have to worry about rinsing off too much. So natural things, if you've got any other eco-friendly products, they're good to go for. It's not going to react with your finishes in the same way, it sort of goes into the surface. I've started degreasing quite a bit with ammonia recently. That's another one. But I suppose the most common famous one is, especially in the UK, is sugar soap. So this is a liquid version. Obviously, you can get it in a granulated version, but it's concentrated. So you just put a small amount in a spray bottle. And I'd say whatever you're cleaning with, having it in spray form, I think is personally the best, because you're not putting great load of water on an old surface. Your solid wood can take it more than your veneer can. You don't want to soak it too much because it might start to lift. Having said that, if these things happen while we're working on it and things chip off or things bubble, you'd rather find that out now while you're fixing it than it happen later on. So, I think if that happens, we can address it. Like I said, sometimes you've got what they say about breaking a few eggs, isn't it? We've got to make it sound, and sometimes that means we have got to take it back a little bit further than we'd like. So I've just got some water, and I have put in the supply list my personal scrubbing. I prefer these because they've got the sponge inside and they can go in the wash, so keep using them. Now I'm starting to look at other options, and if you've done my courses before, you might see that I've changed this, that thing, or the other, and that's what we do, isn't it? I'm going to go and have a look at more natural options, because I'm sure little bits of plastic do end up down the sink, but that's the thin end of a big wedge, because we know we're talking about acrylic paints and So, but these are great. because they're not single-use sponges that get, you just chuck them out. So that's what I use for scrubbing. Please don't use wire wool or anything like that, because you will scratch, and if there's parts of the wood that are coming through the finish, you would scratch it with the wire wool. Plus, and I've been there several times, not intentionally, but wire wool can break and it can go into the grain, and it's particularly bad with oak because oak's got a slightly bigger grain than this. This is a bit finer, and it can get lodged and then it rusts and it leaves black spots, so it's really not worth trying it. I have tried different steel type of like pan scours, but they're actually just too aggressive. So something like this is good, and they do them in all the DIY shops. But the reason I recommend them most is for the stripping process that we're doing next week. They're really good for that. So you use anything for the cleaning, but I would definitely advocate them for the stripping. I was going to do that with the door actually, because I would have cleaned that door. No point showing you cleaning something twice. And so, I've got a bit too low down there. Have you got any questions for me while we're going through? I'm happy to take some at the end. I just want to show you this one because, particularly if you've got old vintage, I think most people have. That's moving by itself. It's quite creepy, isn't it? Right. It's moving, so I'll bring it back into shot in a minute. So I'm just going to spray it on. So I think I've got sugar soap here actually, because this is the Fusion Mineral Paint TSP diluted, but the spray seems to have given up. Oh no, back again. So obviously you want to do this on top of something, maybe put some sheets down maybe, or do it flat. But obviously I end up demonstrating everything standing up, which isn't always the best way to do things. So I'm just going to spray it on the surface. That's not the right way, I'll just get the spray. Yeah, better. There's a bit more there than I've normally put on. And then I'm just going to start to scrub. But I'm not going to just say, oh, I'm done and move on. Obviously, you would take your hands off as well. And then I'm kind of rinsing out my thing as I go, changing the water when it gets dirty. What I was going to show you is, if you just did it very cursorily, see the colour of the water running off down there actually, I don't know if you can see this sort of frosted ghosty bit here. This is where the water is starting to now reactivate dirt or waxes on the surface, which actually I could have just missed because it would have dried. You can see it there. So I leave it for a minute or two and then come back to it. So where anything you see that goes a bit frosted is generally some dirt that needs to go back in. Just scrub it a bit harder. You can see that that's come off. I hope you can see it anyway. It was nice to catch it on the other video, so it is worth going back in and then get my fingernails into that edge there. Or if you've got a more ornate piece than me, you can use these little brushes. There's a link in the supply list, but I haven't. My set's a bit dishevelled. These little tiny ones are really good for cleaning, for stripping, for cleaning hardware. They come in a set of 3 normally, with a brass one, but mine have had a hard time. Couldn't find the little ones, so I've ended up with a set of big ones, which aren't as useful, but they're fairly inexpensive from the DIY stores, and I know Nadine has just put a link into hers. So if I didn't already have a big set, I'd probably buy the one she's got because you get 6. But they're pretty handy to have around to get into the sort of the finer edges. So yeah, just give it that extra scrub. Let's see, I still need to go back to that. I might even do some more product. If you're doing something that's been oiled, just as a word to the wise, like a traditional sort of, what we think of as a traditional mid-century piece, like a teak piece, this will keep coming off because you'll be breaking down the oil, unfortunately, and you kind of just have to keep going with it. So that's starting to come out now. So that's probably where hands have pushed it back. I'd imagine, but it could be furniture polishes as well. Yeah, so that's worth just spending that little bit extra time on that. And then what I do when I've finished is I'll use you've got some rags, or I use the old microfiber cloths, the ones that are too dirty to be in the kitchen now. Just stick them to one side and use them for your furniture, and just get the surface water off before you leave it to dry, because you might have gaps in the finish and you don't really want that to sort of sit there waterlogged if it's a veneer anyway. So that's what you need to do is across the whole piece, gently obviously around these bits of damage like this, because we're not going to be repairing them just yet. We're actually going to go through stripping week before we get to the repairs in the third week, before we start to do anything with them. So you just need to be a little bit careful of them at the minute, when you're scrubbing backwards and forwards. If you've got, I hope you haven't got quite as much damage as me, but if you have, just something to be aware of. I think that's pretty much it. Let me just check. That's it. Yeah, so if you've got your piece and you've got some time this weekend and you want to get cracking, it's getting all of the stuff off, getting it into a container. If you, I'll tell you one thing that might help, because obviously I've been doing this a while and I get a bit more gung-ho. But when you've got little pieces like this, let's just turn it on. My mouse gone to sleep. If you've got little pieces like that, or the thing I showed you before with the nails, you could tape them together so that you know which ones belong to which. Like some of the pieces will have a round-headed top on the screw, like a more decorative one, or the nails, like I say. If you tape them together, you know where they came from, and it's easier than trying to figure it all out at the end. But in terms of the screws, we'll look at that together. Just stick them all in a pot for now, but I would suggest that you replace those, because they're not really designed to go in and out lots of times. They're not easy to use that way, but also they're just not that robust either, so we're better to replace them. So there you go, that's the starting point, getting your piece ready. Let's have a little look. If anyone's got any questions about anything, getting started, getting set up, anything you're worrying about, anything you can't find, just say. Just move some stuff out of the way, because there you go. Stop knocking stuff over. And then next week we'll be looking at the different methods of stripping. I'll be demonstrating them all on various things, and talking about different scenarios, best cases for them, over others. If you don't, you're not really fussed about trying them all, I'd suggest just go down the paint and varnish stripper route with me. We'll do that in depth, and then I'll just demonstrate the other ones, and tell you when the sort of good times to use them are, really. Let's have a little look anyway. Let's see. So Shauna's asking, if you have oiled oak, do you need to get all that off the cleaning before you sand? You don't have to, but you'll find that it will just keep coming, and because you want to get to a point where, this isn't as dirty as I thought it was going to be, considering the look of it, but yeah, anyway, the water's not as bad as I thought it would be, but you want to get to a point where you don't keep bringing off water. Oiled oak, that's interesting. I don't think I've dealt with oiled oak before, though, Shona, to be quite honest with you, because I haven't. So I'd be interested to see. Yeah, I've mainly dealt with it like an old finish or a new finish. I've not dealt with it with oil, so that's interesting as to whether it will just keep on coming. The reason why I mentioned teak is an oily wood, and so you just got this sort of orange slurry that just seems to come off, and you do need to keep going until you've managed to clean up, because otherwise you then have to wait for that oil to dry out enough for you to start to put something on top. It would almost be like having to wait for it to cure again. So when we're doing products, we have to kind of let them, like an oil, before we can put water over the top of it, we have to let it cure, and it's usually about 3 weeks. So yeah, I'd see if you can get your water clear would be the answer. This is modern stuff. Nice. Well, let's have a look at it. I mean, I would say, why not? what have you? Gosh, I don't know what you've got, do I? Let me know what you're looking at doing, or post it up in the group so I can have a look. Because it might be you could take one section of it, but you definitely need to get the oil off before you sand. Yeah, definitely. Because when you're sanding, it creates the friction creates heat, so you're heating up that oil, and it's just going to sink deeper into the wood. And you can put a finish over an oil finish, but I mean, the problem is if you're doing that and sanding it, the oil that's penetrating might be patchy. It might not sort of absorb properly. So we kind of want to clean it back. I would suggest, off the top of my head, is to clean it as much as you can. And it might be something that we look at with a stripper rather than a sanding at that point, because the stripper will handle all of those things. What I love about using the stripper is that it also takes out things like stains quite effectively. Things that are on the surface can be scraped off, can be sanded off, but things that are in the wood, well, you can sand them off, but you're going to have to use quite a large grit, or if you scrape hard, you're going to scrape away wood. So the stripper will cleanse. It's a bit like a cleaning product like cleanser for your face. It will actually get into the wood itself. So that might be the best way to get any residual oil off, so that you've got a really good surface to regroup over the top of. Let's have a look at it, and we'll see. This is the good thing about doing it this way. You come for a weekend and it's all a bit like full on. We can work it out as we go along. So yeah, that's what you fancy working on. Has anybody else got any questions? I think there's some people around. There is a little bit of a lag between where I am and where you are, so I kind of have to pause when I ask that, just to make sure. So I'm hoping to kind of get stripping in earnest on my pieces before I come back for the next session, and then I'll have some sections to show you the different, and also the heat gun is the other one. I'll see how they react, because different finishes behave in different ways. Some of them are thicker than others, and some of them are older, and some of them are made of different ingredients. So I think sometimes get surprised. No. Everybody else is very quiet. Right. I think just I think that's Karen. Great stuff. Well, the session, if anybody's come in towards the end, or didn't get to the beginning, will be available in the group immediately. I will obviously put it into the course resource area probably tomorrow now. Along with the other session is in there as well. They're pretty much the same sort of thing. We've gone into a bit more on the veneer side here in terms of and my other piece of furniture. Brilliant. Well, I hope you're raring to get going, and if you haven't sorted your pieces out, that you find something exciting to work on. And I'll see you for the next session. But I'll also be around the group. If you need anything, just post, and I'll see the notifications, and I can give you a hand. And yes, look forward to seeing you. I think I'll probably go for the same time next week. And if you're watching on catch up, do feel free to stick any questions here below that related to the point of the conversation that you want to ask the question, and I'll happily answer them. So don't feel like you have to wait for the next session. Brilliant. Well, happy cleaning and looking at wood types and swatting up on wood. And I look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Take care, everybody. See you soon.